Hey guys, so welcome to the Sunday series of Economics with a Twist, and we are finally going to look at capitalism today, which is a part of the economic philosophy series. So stay tuned for that. We're going to look at more topics, more like Marxism, communism, all of that. Those will be in future videos. So how I want to go about the topic of capitalism is today we're probably going to look at the theory, the idea, what are the characteristics, not stuff which you'd normally find mentioned. I want to discuss why does it exist and how has capitalism emerged in today's world. Um, the next lecture we're going to go more in deep with what capitalism is, and I want to dedicate one lecture to understanding the whole concept of China's production system. It's a very interesting idea of how they operate because they are what we call a communist capitalist state. So that's basically the structure for this capitalism series. So let's begin. The first idea which I want to look at is the whole definition, which is something which we often confuse. For like when I scroll through Instagram and I see people voicing their opinions against capitalism, the main idea which they have about capitalism, which defines what they believe capitalism is. I'm slipping with the term capitalism, so bear with me. But what they believe it is a system where there's a lot of exploitation of labor and even resources to an extent. While that is true, that is a characteristic, it's not the definition. So let's understand the definition. Capitalism is an economic system where the nation's industries and trade exists in the hands of a few private players or private sector in general, and they are operating for profit. The key term here is for profit, right? Now, profit as such is basically the, I would call it the earnings which a firm is making, because they are doing it so that they can sustain their growth, expansion, all of that in the future. But profit as such may be taken as a negative term, but that's what capitalism basically entails. Now, there are three key ideas to define how capitalist a nation is, and these three ideas are the degree of competition which exists in the market, the level of government intervention which is taking place, and the scope of state ownership. So, heavy terms, but let's break it down. So, level of competition is in that particular or in any particular sector which is termed capitalist, how many players are actually controlling the market? Is it a monopoly, a one player, oligopoly, duopoly? We need to understand how many players are operating, because that will define how capitalist a particular market or a particular sector is. Secondly, we're looking at the level of intervention. Now, it's impossible to assume that there are economies, there are sectors, there are industries in the world where the government doesn't intervene at all. I mean, any intervention, be it the tax you need to pay or the something like a provident fund, you're making a contribution for CSR, all of this is government intervention to an extent. Now, that is all a part of government intervention. And third, when you're looking at the scope of state ownership, is if in a particular sector, one of the players is a government firm or a public sector undertaking, a public sector enterprise, that is scope of state ownership in simple terms. If there is or if in a particular firm it's a 50-50 sort of relationship where 51% is controlled by the government, 49% by the private sector. All of this is state ownership, and the level of state ownership in a particular industry determines how capitalist it is. Now, let's break it down. Why do critics, obviously critics, but why do a lot of people hate capitalism today? It's rooted in the fact that capitalism creates inequality, and I have nothing against it. It does create inequality. We'll look at it shortly. And it supports what society refers to as the 1%. It encourages wage labor, which is any sort of labor or any individual who is working without having any security about their job is what is wage labor, where they don't know if they're going to be employed tomorrow. Moreover, they get paid pittance for the work they do. That is wage labor, and capitalism thrives on it. And the supporters of capitalism, which by the tone of this video, a lot of you will also say is me. But the supporters of capitalism believe that capitalism provides you more choice because a firm will produce better products when they have cheaper labor. They'll give you better choices. That's one idea. And it also believes in the idea that wealth is distributed to all the productive people. And the key idea which I want to focus on today is capitalism has efficient use of factors of production. Okay? And let's dive deeper into this idea. Now, capitalism is always opposed by the idea of communism, and communism is state-controlled ownership of your trade, industries, all of that. And why is that a problem? The problem is, even if it might be a welfare, like let's assume communism, for all its flaws, was also a perfect setup. The issue arises in the fact that the state has to control and has to take decisions for 1,000 sectors, 10,000 sectors, industries, different ideas. You cannot be a rational human being and say that a state will take the right decisions for all those 10,000 players, or all those 10,000 firms. And when you have a set system where one particular player, that is the government here, has to take the decisions for so many sectors, there will be errors which creep in, there will be inefficiency which sets in the economy, and that leads to a huge downward spiral. So forgetting the idea of military coups and no freedom of speech, all of that, ignore it. Just efficiency wise, communism has a flaw. Now, capitalism does not have this flaw because the best players are the ones who control the industries. So that's one of the key ideas where I feel that capitalism has a huge stand. Now, one thing which we have to look at is capitalism has, so the three determinants of how capitalist a system is, which I had explained at the start, also is how we determine the different types of capitalism. So we have what is known as welfare capitalism, social capitalism, ethical capitalism, and advanced capitalism. Advanced capitalism is what we all should oppose, we all must oppose, because advanced capitalism thrives on the idea that anyone can be exploited, any resource can be exploited, that there exists only one or two big players, the government has no role, there's no concept of welfare. Advanced capitalism that way is horrid. It will lead to huge economic inequalities. It will lead to a system where there is 1% and there is 99,000%. That 1% is one person or one player who controls everything in the nation. Be it the government, be it the society, be it any aspect, any facet of the society. Now, that is what I find. Unfortunately, we construe capitalism to be advanced capitalism. And let me debunk this myth, it is not. Capitalism has a lot of characteristics which segregate it, which classify it and differentiate it completely from advanced capitalism. Now let's look at it in deeper length. Sorry for this rant. Right. So capitalism has 8 characteristics, and I have written it down so that I don't end up forgetting. One is capital accumulation. So a capitalist system also has, you can use your money to buy capital, you keep accumulating capital. Capital is what I use to create more income, more money. Commodity production, where you're basically producing one commodity. That commodity could also refer to workers. So that's one idea. Private ownership, we've gone through it. Wage labor. Wage labor is labor where the laborer has to work for a particular wage, And that wage, my mom and I were talking, that wage could also be what is known as piece wage. So if let's say it's a firm where you're looking at stitching, you're making clothes, right? So labor could also be paid as to how many buttons they're stitching onto that shirt. And it's really pittance. Like some workers have to work maybe 12 hours a day and they get paid like 30-40 rupees, which is horribly below the wage rate. But that is wage labor. Then you make investments to create profit, which is a fair idea. It ties into the idea of capitalism, capital accumulation, where you make investments, you're investing in firms, in even human infrastructure, and that results in profit. The next idea is price mechanism. This is how do I call it? It's a slightly dicey topic, but price mechanism refers to the idea that I can compete with my other firms, put a bid, and purchase maybe a factor of production, purchase resources. So the best example I can give is when your telecom sectors are bidding for spectrum, so 4G spectrum, 5G spectrum, all of that. When the telecom companies are bidding for it, the one who pays the lowest price, it's like an auction basically. Price mechanism refers to an auction system. The seventh characteristic is the economic efficient use of factors of production, which I have gone through. And the idea of self-interest. Self-interest is a crazy idea, you'll look at it later. Now, with all of this in mind, where we differentiate capitalism from advanced capitalism is the fact that advanced capitalism has wage labor to a horrific extent. Capitalism, not so much. It does have it, but not to that degree. Then there is no price mechanism in advanced capitalism because there's only one dude and that dude controls everything. Think of it in that way. Even economically efficient use of factors of production does not completely exist in advanced capitalism setup because that dude who owns everything does not need to use his resources efficiently. He can make probably funny example, but if I have to make a mango juice, he could probably use one mango and put like 30,000 additives to it and make this weird shape. He's free to do it. He or she is free to do it, and they're not governed by any sort of ethics, I would say. Best idea. But yeah, like each of the characteristics which I mentioned, if you were to inflate it to a horrific extent, that's advanced capitalism, and that is what everyone in theory, in literature has opposed. Adam Smith in The Wealth of Nations went on to categorically state that if these ideas of capitalism were to be exploited to the degree which he feared, it's the worst system possible. And when we have texts, when we have academicians, all of them who have stated that you can't inflate all these ideas and state that it's capitalism, that is totally wrong. You cannot do that. You cannot just find the worst qualities in all of it and connote that as capitalism. And that is where the government steps in. Like I stated at the start, the government has a role to play in setting a limit, setting caps to all these characteristics. And when you have an efficient government doing these, taking laws, setting up caps, limits, all of that, capitalism is a setup which can work. May not work perfectly, for sure, but it can work. Now, coming to the what's it called? The doozy for this episode. Why has capitalism grown? Why has the idea that commodities need to become cheaper, labor doesn't need to have security? It's all emerged due to human behavior and human wants. At the end of the day, capitalism is an economic system. An economic system is based on how the human reacts to different economic phenomena, right? Now, you as a person may want to buy, a person who's in the lower middle class may want to buy a Nike shoe, right? And Nike shoe or any luxury good till now was reserved for the elite. Now, if that same Nike shoe costs 600 or 700 rupees, which comes in the budget of a lower middle class family, they would want to buy it. But for Nike to produce it at 600 rupees and still be a Nike product with good quality, all of that, they need to use labor and everything else extremely cheap. It has to come at a really cheap cost. So, for critiquing capitalism, we need to critique ourselves. If we are demanding commodities which are cheaper, the market will provide to us. That's the beauty of the market. It's going to give us whatever we want. It's just that we need to think of to what extent are we willing to sacrifice human ideals in order to achieve uh, any sort of satisfaction, right? So, yeah, capitalism, I've put down a phrase which I thought of. Capitalism is the market's response to our whims and fancies. And I think that should resonate with all of us because to critique capitalism, like I said, it's a critique of ourselves. And the next lecture, what we're going to look at is diving deeper into the idea of exactly what capitalism should hold if executed properly. We're going to look at the government's role in capitalism and what is modern day capitalism to a rational individual and what does it connote. And post that, we're going to look at China's role as a communist capitalist state. So that's it for this lecture. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.